standards. You're adorable. No zombie lives! Welcome back, I'm Captain Xavier, and today we're going to be talking about the Stryfle. We're going to start with the history of the Stryfle. The Stryfle has been part of the crew's HVZ arsenal since the Stryfe came out. We actually got into HVZ before the Stryfe was released. And the moment that they were released, we all went out and bought them. I had a pair on pre-order on Amazon for like 6 months waiting for them to release it. And I immediately used them as sidearms, but many of the crew wanted to use them as their primaries because it was a semi-automatic magazine-fed blaster. So the sergeant wanted his to be a battle rifle, and so he built and developed what was known as the Stryfle Mark I. And it uses, as you can see, a Raider stock and a long strike barrel because that's what we had available. The Retaliator, we didn't have those parts yet. I don't know if they'd even been released yet, or if they were, we just hadn't bought them because we were all penniless college students. But the lieutenant already had Raider stocks and long strike barrels in his arsenal, and so the sergeant major was able to put together this. And he liked it because he felt it looked a bit like an FNFAL, and he actually had one of those, and I fired it, and it's fantastic. And so that became his Stryfle. As soon as the Retaliator came out and we started getting our hands on them, we developed the Stryfle Mark II, which is a Stryfe with a Retaliator stock and barrel. And this became kind of the fairly standard issue for a lot of the crew when we did HVZ because it worked. Now the lieutenant used an Elite Raven and I used my Stampede, but a lot of the crew were using Stryfle Mark IIs. And most of them served very well. For some reason, the quartermaster had nothing but issues with hers, and she ended up nicknaming it Starscream when it failed her for the last time, and got her tagged. I think when we were doing the National Guard loadouts, because this one obviously has a little bit more of an AR feel about it. So that's what we used when we did the National Guard stuff for the WSU's HVZ. Now, obviously, being the crew, we had to escalate things and immediately started looking for ways to make these more functional and more usable. So we started looking into master keys. One of the first was this triad rail adapter by, I think it was Sly Dev. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's who we got it from. And it worked. It gave you an extra shot for when you happened to run out, just as from your magazine, just as a zombie was rushing you. Later on, when they came out, I made the same thing, but for a hot shock, using metal and bolts, and it's also very, very solid, but it fires mega. So either when you're coming up against something that, like a shield or various super zombies that require mega ammo, you've got a foregrip that now fires that. A lot of guys really liked foregrips, and so they really wanted these, as opposed to what was the more, I guess, standardized or more popular, or at least in my opinion, the more utilitarian, the rough cut. The rough cut master key. When these came out, I immediately went out and got one and hacked the handle off and made the necessary cuts so that it could be made into a master key. Developed my own rail-to-rail adapters, just using, in this case, Delrin, I think, and bolts. I also did it with metal and bolts. And this had the advantage of it fires multiple rounds. And there were, in fact, super zombies at WSU. Their tanks took 3 hits. So 1 from the main blaster and 2 from here was a single pop, tank is down. There were also a couple occasions where my primary ran out, and so I had to switch to this. And on at least one occasion, 2 zombies were rushing me, and I got them both with 1 volley, 1 from each barrel. And never could have done it twice, but they didn't need to know that. They were very impressed. I felt smug. And that was the primary for quite a while, until the Magnus came out. And that was one of those, I was so excited because somebody had already done the master key of it, and it looked so good. And it fired the heavier ammunition. It had multiple. It held 3 rounds. The whole pump action, load from underneath, everything I loved about it aesthetically. I liked the look that it created, and I don't know. So I immediately built mine. My previous one was, of course, the black Stryfle Mark II that I've done a video on. And so that became kind of the standard, because we ran into a lot of places where Mega did special damage. Afterworlds, Ragnaroktoberfest, lots of HVZs that we'd played in. And so this became the standard. And so when I talked in the past about developing a standard Stryfle, this was what I was envisioning, and I was hoping that somebody could develop a kit that would address some of the issues that I didn't like about the design. One, I didn't like that the top of the Stryfe and the top of the barrel were so far off, just because of the way the barrel is centered because of the flywheels. I didn't like all of the gaps that existed, and I actually didn't like the fact that you could easily take it apart because it kept falling apart on me. And so I posted that I was looking for this, and a couple of people reached out with wanting to help. There's a guy who goes to WSU, but life got in the way for him. He went and got real busy with the pandemic and all of that. Franz Foamworks reached out, but they were already they'd already developed their own front end, so it was kind of not a huge jump to be able to make the modifications to what I was looking for. But they were busy working on their power stock. And then Campbell Nerf Works reached out and said, "Hey, I think I already have exactly what you're looking for. You want to take a look?" And he showed it to me, and yeah, it was exactly what I was looking for. It had the top rail bit that leveled it out with the top of the Stryfe. It had the bit that filled in the gaps here. This rail went the entire length. And then he had also the rail, the gap fillers for the sides on either side that had Picatinny rail, the sling mount gap filler, and then a replacement slide. So it was the full front end of absolutely everything that I had wanted. So he sent me this. This was the Mark I version. There were a couple of things that I didn't like. There were a couple of things that I recommended. Hey, could you change this? Could you change that? The slide was a little bit too short. You ended up cutting off the trigger lock release tab. And so unless you removed the trigger lock, you couldn't actually fire the blaster. These parts all slid onto the rails, which meant you had to make modifications to the barrel, which I wasn't a huge fan of, especially this one because it was gear up, but sacrifices have to be made. And this part was so tight I had to put it on with a mallet, and I ended up cracking it slightly. These parts were absolutely fantastic, though. So I sent back my recommendations for what I would like to see changed, and he sent back the Mark II version. Now the Mark II, these parts are two parts that are screwed together. So there's a seam down the center, and they just screw together using 3 standard Nerf screws, which most of us probably have a bin or a bag of lying around. If not, I believe Foam Blast and probably Out of Darts sells just replacement screws. So the fact that those are now separate parts resolved those issues of installing it. No modifications are required whatsoever to the Stryfe or the barrel now. There are modifications still required to the Magnus, of course, and he has a video on all of the cuts that you need to make. It'll be down in the description. You cut the lip off the front of the rail here, you cut the slide down, you cut the handle down, you cut the dovetail on the back off. And he's got the exact measurements that you need in his video, so check that out. And yeah, it addressed that. This wasn't so tight, it now slid on perfectly. The side rail and the top were exactly right, and now the lower slide is long enough that it doesn't remove that trigger release tab, but still doesn't come back so far that it's going to interfere with any magazine. You can run any of the drums in this because of the way he's got this notched out and the cut that he made on the back of the Magnus. Yeah, even the 50-round drum will fit in this with no problem. So yeah, this kit is everything that I wanted and more. He is making it available on Thingiverse. Anybody is welcome to download it. You are welcome to make upgrades and modifications. Be sure, if you're going to, let him know. Make sure you give him full credit for the original design. And if they're really good, we may replace his designs with your designs if they're enough of an improvement, or just link them and make them available and all of that. This is meant to be an open source sort of thing where anyone is able to make whatever changes they feel necessary. If you want to alter it so that it would fit on, say, a long strike barrel, because the rails aren't the same, but they're similar enough it wouldn't be too hard to make those modifications if you really wanted to. And other things that you might decide you want to do slightly differently, change the design on this. There's lots of stuff, and you are welcome to tinker. We are also going to be reaching out to manufacturers of the various companies that 3D print kits to sell, Foam Blast, Out of Darts, Franz Foamworks, Silver Fox, all of those, and see if any of them are interested in producing and selling this kit. Campbell Nerf Works has made it clear that he's perfectly okay with anyone producing it. He would love it if you, you know, if he got something out of it, but he isn't requiring it, and it would really just be a matter of, you know, either a flat fee to use it as a license thing, or, you know, royalties based on sales, whatever you feel is fair. You can discuss it with him. At the very, very least, give the man credit, because this is just an incredibly complicated part. All of the design that went into making this match up with all of the lines and everything is just an incredible design. Now, I have said that this is the standard Stryfle. That does not mean that it is standard issue, that you're required to have one, that you can't make any modifications, that it has to be exactly this. No. Auxiliary doesn't work that way. It's a militia. Whatever gear you prefer to use is the gear that you should use. But if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want to build a blaster for HVZ, what should I build? This is going to be our first recommendation. Build yourself a Stryfle. It's fantastic. It's got Mega for taking out supers. It's semi-automatic, magazine-fed. You could also get a select fire kit for it and have the best of all the worlds, and it will serve incredibly well in HVZ. Things like what stock you go with, entirely up to you. If you want a battery stock, if you want a shorter stock, a longer stock, whatever, something with a thumb hole thing, knock yourself out. Handguard, entirely up to you. The internals, we are also not going to make any effort to standardize internals, because just based on the materials available from out of darts, there are, I believe, 10,290 different possible motor wheel cage combinations. So we're not going to try to standardize that. 2S, 3S, again, doesn't matter. As long as your FPS is below the maximum allowed by the event, I could not possibly care less what internals you put into it. That's just entirely you. Optics, also, entirely up to you. Color, run with it. This one is obviously not my HVZ one. This is the one I use for things like Afterworlds and events where realism is encouraged or required. This would be the one that I would take to like End War or Ragnar Oktoberfest or any public events. I will probably paint it up a little bit, get rid of the white, make it black, add the X-Strike logo. Might go with a different stock. This was just the nicest orange stock I had lying around. I do have the Gear Up one, but this one was more solid. So yeah, this one is for non-public events, obviously, given the coloring. I could build one where I could swap the kits, and then there'd be a lot more orange on it, but it'd still be awfully nude black. So there you have it. Campbell Nerf Works. I cannot thank you enough for developing this and for making it available to everybody. Links to all of the stuff will be down in the description, of course, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. People have been building Stryfle, you know, the standard Stryfles with, you know, basically standard Stryfle means Stryfle Mark II and a Magnus, but it's entirely up to you. People have built some gorgeous ones. I've seen them in blues and oranges and yellows and reds, and it's just, you know, to make it match the Magnus, and people just done beautiful stuff. One of the downsides with the whole Stryfle concept is, of course, the Stryfle has now been discontinued. Will we be developing a kit that does the same thing for the Phoenix? I don't know. There are probably millions of Stryfes that were produced, so getting your hands on one shouldn't be impossible, but it is going to become more difficult. And that may change our standard in the future. We will see. We might end up going with an off-brand version and creating a kit that does this for something else. We will see. But for now, the Stryfle Mark II with Magnus Master Key is the standard. And it's absolutely fantastic. So, let me know what you guys think down in the description, or down in the comments. Give a shout out to Campbell Nerf Works for doing this. Check out his stuff. Check out his video. Really excited that this is finally a thing. And thank you guys for watching. Bangarang!